Hey guys, welcome back to the layout and welcome to episode 1 of our Crawford scenery series video. Let me restart. Our Crawford scenery video series. There we go. Not the best of starts, but got that out of the way. I guess I should mention then what we're going to do in this video, which, as I already alluded to, is building an overpass. And to do that, I picked up a couple of Rick's Products kits. This is the modern highway overpass. That'll obviously go over the top of our portal over here, and the goal is to really hide that portal and make it seem like there's not a hole in the wall there at all. And rather than just using trees, I think it'd be fun to do it with an overpass. So in addition to the actual road portion, we then have to build a retaining wall on either side of the main line out of some styrene. We're just going to scratch build that. We'll also have to do a bit of landscaping here and build the scenery up with some insulation foam, and then we'll also be modifying the fascia here so that it conforms to the land contour. So there's a lot to talk about just in this video. I'm super excited. I'm already incoherent and blabbering on, so you guys have that to look forward to, but there's so much to do. There's so much to look forward to. Hopefully you guys enjoy a lot. I'm ready for this fun journey, and hopefully we get good at doing some scenery. So anyway, thank you guys for joining me. Let's jump in and build an overpass. So to start off with, I decided to cut the road section, and I did this because I wanted to make sure I had the length and the shape right before I began anything else. As you can see, this scene over here, as it moves towards the wall, tapers off, and then the molding from the door actually eats into that last few inches, or really like half an inch or so of fascia. So I needed to make sure that I cut the road section to fit around that so it would look nice and flush when all finished. So to do this, I cut the road section with a number 5 X-Acto blade, which was easy enough, and then I was able to just snap that end piece off, and then as you can see, it fit really nicely, pretty flush with the door. So once it's all installed, it'll look nice and professional and finished. So before we move forward, I do want to show you a photo of the prototype inspiration once again. Of course, this is a road overpass, not a railroad, but the concept still applies. And I've identified in this photo a couple of structures that I'll have to build beyond just the overpass. So of course we're going to have our retaining walls on either side. Those will come later. But what you'll see is here's our main overpass. There's the barriers up on top. Here are the I-beams. But then the I-beams ultimately rest on an abutment with a little notch in it, so there's sort of like a pedestal up there on the abutment, and then the face of this abutment sort of sweeps in, right? There's this sharp 90-degree angle, but I would imagine behind all this dirt here, this face would continue back and up. So I'm going to build that all out of one piece of styrene. It also goes back in, and I'm just going to build that essentially as a box structure, so that then, and that'll be for either side, so there'll be a box structure on either side with this angle in it and the abutment and pedestal. So then we can assemble our overpass to the proper length. I'll cut all the I-beams and the barriers and stuff like that, and then we can just rest the overpass onto these structures here, and once those end structures are in place, we can then start filling in this land you see here with foam, and then on the face of the foam I will then build the retaining walls separately, if that makes sense. So just briefly, I want to show you, here's sort of how I've drawn it out. If you can imagine, the photo, the drawing I have here is a profile of those end structures that I keep referencing in the same orientation that you see here. So there's that sort of that L structure you see there. You can see it a little better over on this side. So that's what I've drawn here. There's the notch, there's the pedestal that I'll be installing using a couple of rectangle pieces back to back. And then over here, if we take a look at the wall, you can see that I have drawn some markings in here. This that you see where I'm running my finger, that's the height of the I-beam, and then there's a little section there, that's actually the depth of the road, and you can see once again there's that end structure that I've referenced a few times now. You can see how I've drawn that in, and those are some rough measurements, and you can see how it comes out. So it'll come out, excuse me, this far, there's that line. So this face of the end structure is actually going to be longer than the face along the wall, just because the whole scene here starts to angle out. So those are just some of the complications I'm dealing with, but I think I got my measurements fairly accurate. So now I'm going to start putting this together and we'll see how it turns out. So after taking some measurements and determining exactly what the distance was from the fascia to where the abutment needed to be, as well as from the backdrop to where the abutment needed to stop, I just once again used my X-Acto blade and a metal ruler to cut out the 4/100ths of an inch styrene, which is the thickness I was using for these structures. And that was pretty easy to put together. The one challenge was that, as with the, of course, road surface, the scene is still at an angle. So for the abutment that sits closest towards the fascia, I had to make sure that this structure was actually assembled so that it fit to an angled surface once we install the fascia. So I have the two end structures sort of mocked up right now. All I did was tape all the pieces together, so I still have to glue them together, but this gives you an idea of what it's going to look like. And right now, this barrier that I have out on this side, I actually trimmed off the bottom edge, because what's going to happen is this side, without that little notch in it, and let me get the other one for comparison. This is what it looks like stock. So I took off that bottom square piece so that it can sit flush on this back edge, because it's going to go up against the wall there, and I don't really want any gap. So anyway, I just put this here for the sake of it, to give you an idea. You can see, if we turn this way, of course I haven't trimmed this piece off, but this is what those I-beams will rest on top of. The top of the structure is notched out so that when I have the barrier on there with that drop down square piece, which of course I removed from that one right there, but we can see it there, right? It'll rest there, and then that bottom square will sit on that leading edge, the top edge of our structure there. So anyway, that's what it's looking like. And then of course we'll have to do the retaining walls and build all of the scenery around it. And the reason I put it on this cork over here is because I'm actually going to mount these structures to end scale cork, and that's what I have right there. So that's the exact height that it'll sit above the rails, and you can see there's plenty of clearance for double stacks. So with the mock-up all taped together and looking good, I decided that everything fit well, so it was time to glue it all together. And to do this, I just used some standard plastic cement. Before I actually glued the pieces, I made sure to sand them with some really fine grit sandpaper, because I noticed as I cut the pieces out, some of them tended to form a bit of a lip, and I just wanted to make sure there was no flash or any lips left, so everything fit together nice and squarely. And of course, I mentioned that things needed to go together squarely, and one of the difficulties in doing that is making sure that we have 90-degree angles in the structure, especially for a square structure like we have here. So I just put two 1x3 pieces of wood together to form sort of an L girder, and then I could take my cut out styrene pieces that needed to meet at a 90-degree angle and just place one each on the surface of the two pieces of 1x3, and then once they were situated and sitting down, I could take the plastic cement and just brush it on there. And then in addition to that, I cut out some really small triangular gussets, and these just help to further reinforce the structure once it's all dried. Using the plastic cement from testers, I read the instructions, and it said it usually really sets within a few minutes, or maybe even under a minute, but I let it sit for about 20 minutes, and then it was actually pretty sturdy to handle, and it says it fully dries within 2 hours. With the abutments assembled, I then decided it was time to turn my attention towards the actual road structure, and this comes in multiple pieces from the Rick's product kit. There's actually the road surface, we have barriers on either side, and there's also then the support pieces, which are the I-beams, which sit underneath. And right out of the box, these I-beams are just a little bit too long. I took a quick measurement between our two abutments, and it looks like we needed to cut them down to about 6.5 inches or so. So to do this, I took, once again, a piece of 1x3 as my surface to cut, and then I have a sort of a fine-tooth modeling saw which cuts really nicely through the molded plastic. I didn't have to cut off too much since they're not too much longer than 6.5 inches right out of the package. And then I tested this first piece, and as you can see, it fit very well. So I just repeated the same process for the other 4 sections and then set them down on the abutment to make sure everything fit well. The overall length of the road that I needed was a bit longer than the length that comes in one package, which is why I bought 2 kits. So there was one seam where I had to glue 2 separate road sections together. The second piece I had to cut quite a bit shorter since it was only a few inches to the backdrop. But this was easy enough to do because the pieces of road actually come with a preformed lip on them. So I just had to spread some plastic cement on there, press them together for a few seconds, and that was nice and sturdy. So here we are. I have the barriers on either side installed, and there you can see the difference between the 2 barriers front and back. So everything's on there nicely. You can see I tried to line up where I put the gaps. So I put the long span in the middle of the bridge to match our photo. Sorry, let me grab this. You can sort of see right in the middle on either end there's sort of a gap there that slightly overlaps the end structures there, or the abutment. So I tried to model that there. Now the challenge is going to be how to attach these I-beams to the bridge itself, and I think what I'm going to do is leave them in here, run a bead of glue on each of those, and then carefully set this on there and then let it sit for a little bit, and then those I-beams should all be attached to our bridge, and we should be able to lift the whole section out as a piece, because I fear if I try to apply these separately, if I pull them out of there, that I'm not going to be able to line them up correctly, because you can see it's a pretty snug fit by design. And just as a note, the Rix Products kit comes with 3 I-beams and then 2 flat beams. So this is an I-beam, the middle one's an I-beam, the last one's an I-beam. This is a flat beam, so it's only open on one side, and here's the other flat beam which faces the other way, if you can kind of see how that works there. With the road and the barriers all glued together and nice and sturdy, I had to think a lot about how to then attach the road section to its I-beams, because what I want to have is the ability to lift the road out. And the problem is, if I just went ahead and kind of eyeballed and tried to glue the I-beams to the bottom surface of the road, hoping that I took accurate measurements and made sure everything lined up, there was no guarantee that once it all glued together that I would be able to accurately set it back into the abutments without the I-beams being too out of whack, if you know what I mean. So I decided that I'd leave the I-beams in place and then glue or add glue to the top side of them, and once I had the glue on there, I made sure to quickly move the top surface of the road and then set it on top of the I-beams, which of course were resting on top of the abutment. So essentially I just put the whole thing together, and then I weighted down the top surface of the road so that the glue set nicely between the I-beams and the road surface. I was a little skeptical that this would work, honestly, because I wasn't sure if everything would meet up flushly, but I think by adding the weight that really helped, and I was able to pull the whole road section, including the I-beams, out as one piece, and it turned out really well. And then as a final piece, I actually needed to raise the overall height of the overpass just a little bit so I could have a little more clearance on my double stack and auto rack cars. So I put in some close fitting pieces of 1/8 inch cork, and that I just adhered with some heavy duty liquid nails. Once again, I weighted these down so that they fit nice and squarely and the glue adhered nicely, and once dry we had sort of a nice weighted base which completed the overall structure of each abutment. And that really wraps it up for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that Of course, be sure to stay tuned for the second part of this episode, because obviously we are not done with this overpass. We still have quite a bit to do. We need to build the retaining walls, we'll add paint and details, and then we'll also fill in the surrounding land using pink insulation foam. So if you have any questions for this video, feel free to leave those below. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And if you haven't and feel like it, feel free to like and subscribe. That'll just, of course, help you stay in the loop. For everyone who is already subscribed and continues to follow along, thank you guys for stopping in once again. But to everyone, hopefully I'll see you next time. Stay tuned, and thanks so much for watching.